My name is Ethan Carter, and if you asked my family who I was, they would probably say, the one who never became anything. Daniel closed another big deal, my father said as soon as I walked into Grandpa Henry's birthday party. You could learn something from your brother. I forced a smile. Good to see you too, Dad. My older brother laughed. Don't be so sensitive. I'm not. Sure, he said. My mother handed Daniel a drink. We're just trying to help you. I looked around the crowded room. Grandpa's 85th birthday should have been a happy day, but family gatherings always felt like job interviews I was destined to fail. Dad pointed at Daniel. At his age, your brother was already managing clients. At my age, I'm trying to finish a novel, I replied. A novel? Dad shook his head. Dreams don't pay bills. They can. Not for you. Daniel smirked. Maybe the book is about how to avoid work. Several relatives laughed. I felt heat rise into my face. For years, I had heard the same jokes. Lazy. Failure. Disappointment. Grandpa's voice cut through the room. That's enough. The laughter stopped. Dad cleared his throat. We're only teasing. You've been teasing him for 10 years, Grandpa said. It stopped being funny a long time ago. Nobody answered. Grandpa looked at me and smiled. Come sit with me, Ethan. I walked to his table and sat down. Thank you, I said quietly. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. I laughed. That's better, he said. I was worried you forgot how. Across the room, Daniel was already telling another story about his success. Grandpa followed my gaze. Does it bother you? Sometimes. Only sometimes. Fine. Most of the time. He nodded. Tell me about the book. That simple question meant more than he knew. It's about a man rebuilding his life after losing everything. Why that story? Because starting over scares people. And you? It scares me too. Grandpa leaned back. Good stories come from honest fears. Before I could answer, Dad approached our table. Dad, everyone's waiting for cake. Grandpa smiled. Then they should eat cake. Dad frowned. I'm serious. So am I. Dad looked at me. You've been hiding over here all evening. I'm talking to Grandpa. You should spend that energy finding a real career. Grandpa's expression hardened. Robert, today is my birthday. Dad sighed. Fine. After he left, I rubbed my forehead. Sorry. You didn't do anything wrong, Grandpa said. It never ends. No, it doesn't. Maybe they're right. His eyes narrowed. About what? Maybe I am wasting my life. Do you believe that? I hesitated. I don't know anymore. Grandpa was quiet for a moment. When I was young, my father told me I would never succeed. I blinked. Really? Every week. What happened? I proved him wrong. How? I stopped asking for permission to become myself. His words settled deep inside me. You really think I can do this writing thing? I think you care about it. That's not the same thing. It's where success starts. For the first time all day, I felt lighter. The family gathered around the giant birthday cake. Candles flickered as everyone sang. Grandpa stood in front of the cake, smiling. I noticed him sway slightly. Grandpa? He steadied himself. I'm fine. The song continued. Then his hand slipped from the table. The smile vanished from his face. Grandpa! I shouted. His body collapsed. The room erupted into chaos. My mother screamed. Dad rushed forward. Daniel grabbed a phone. I dropped to my knees beside Grandpa. Grandpa, can you hear me? His eyes were half open. Ethan, he whispered. I'm here. Good. Stay with me. His grip tightened weakly around my hand. I'm trying. Fear slammed into my chest. Someone call an ambulance. I already did, Daniel yelled. The next few minutes felt unreal. People shouted. Chairs scraped across the floor. I never let go of Grandpa's hand. Please, I whispered. Please don't leave. The ambulance finally arrived. Paramedics rushed inside. One of them gently moved me aside. We've got him. As they lifted Grandpa onto a stretcher, he looked toward me. I could not tell if he wanted to say something or if I only imagined it. The ambulance doors closed. The siren began to wail. I stood frozen in the parking lot, watching the lights disappear into the night, feeling terrified that everything in my life was about to change forever. Nobody around me seemed to notice how badly my hands were shaking. Dad was arguing with a paramedic. Mom was crying into Daniel's shoulder. For once, nobody was talking about money, success, or failure. We were all staring at the same frightening uncertainty ahead that night alone. 3 weeks after Grandpa collapsed, I sat beside his hospital bed again. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of machines. "You're back," Grandpa said with a faint smile. "I never left for long." "Good answer." I pulled my chair closer. "How are you feeling today?" "Like an old truck with too many miles." I laughed. "That bad?" "Worse." For a moment, we simply looked at each other. During those weeks, I had spent every day at the hospital. My parents visited when it was convenient. Daniel usually stayed for 10 minutes before leaving to answer business calls. Grandpa noticed everything. "Did your father come today?" he asked. "For 15 minutes. "And Daniel?" "About the same." Grandpa nodded slowly. "They're busy." "That's one word for it." "You sound angry." "I'm trying not to be." "Why?" "Because being angry never changes anything." He smiled. "You've learned that earlier than I did." The next day, I returned with coffee and a notebook. Grandpa pointed at it. "Working on the book?" "A little." "Read me something." "It's not finished." "Neither am I." I shook my head. "You always have an answer." "That comes with age." I opened the notebook and read a short passage. When I finished, Grandpa looked pleased. "You made that character feel real." "Really?" "Of course. No one else thinks so." "I'm not talking about anyone else." His words mattered more than he realized. A few days later, rain tapped against the hospital window. Grandpa seemed more thoughtful than usual. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Anything." "When I was 22, I failed." I blinked. "You?" "3 businesses in a row." "What happened?" "I lost money. Friends left. Family laughed." "That sounds familiar." "It does, doesn't it?" I smiled weakly. "How did you keep going?" "Because I finally understood something." "What?" "Success is not money." I frowned. "Then what is it?" "It's waking up without being ashamed of who you are." His answer stayed in my mind. That evening, Daniel stopped by. "Hey, Grandpa." "Hello, Daniel." Daniel checked his phone. "The company is expanding." "That's nice. We might open another office." Grandpa nodded politely. After a few minutes, Daniel left. When the door closed, Grandpa sighed. "He never stops running. He wants to succeed." "So do you." "That's different." "Why?" "Because nobody believes I can." Grandpa looked directly at me. "I do." The words hit harder than I expected. I looked away before he noticed my eyes watering. Days passed. His health continued to decline. The doctors tried to stay optimistic, but I could hear the truth hidden behind their careful words. One evening, the sunset painted the room gold. Grandpa reached for my hand. I held it immediately. "Ethan." "Yeah?" "Listen carefully." My chest tightened. "Okay. People will spend your whole life telling you what you are worth." I swallowed hard. "They already do. Don't let them decide it." His grip weakened. "Promise me." "I promise." "Good." We sat together in silence. A few minutes later, he closed his eyes. I thought he was sleeping. Then the monitor changed. A nurse rushed inside. Another followed. I stood frozen. "Sir, please step back," someone said. I couldn't move. "Grandpa?" The room became a blur of voices and motion. Then everything stopped. A doctor lowered his head. "I'm sorry." The words shattered something inside me. The funeral took place 4 days later. I stood beside Grandpa's grave while cold winds swept across the cemetery. For a while, everyone acted sad. Then I overheard my father speaking to Daniel. "I wonder how the estate is divided." Daniel lowered his voice. "The business assets should stay in the family." Mom joined them. "Your grandfather always favored stability." I stared at them in disbelief. Grandpa had been gone less than a week. They were already discussing money. That night, after everyone left, I remained at the cemetery alone. "I kept my promise," I whispered. The silence felt endless. For the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. I had lost the one person who truly believed in me. As darkness settled around the cemetery, I remembered every conversation we had shared. I remembered his laugh, his patience, and the way he defended me when nobody else would. Those memories hurt, but they also gave me enough strength to keep walking forward each day. What I did not know was that Grandpa still had one final message waiting for me, and it would change everything. 5 weeks after the funeral, my family gathered inside the office of Grandpa's lawyer. The room smelled like old paper and polished wood. I sat quietly near the end of the long table while everyone else talked. Dad adjusted his tie. Dad always believed in keeping the business strong. Daniel nodded. He knew who could handle responsibility. I already knew what they meant. Mom glanced at me. Ethan, you should listen carefully today. I'm listening. Good, Dad said. Maybe you'll learn something. I looked away. Nothing had changed. Even after Grandpa's death, I was still the family disappointment. The office door opened. A tall man with gray hair entered carrying several folders. Good afternoon, he said. I'm Michael Whitmore. Everyone greeted him. Mr. Whitmore sat at the head of the table. Thank you for coming. As you know, we are here to review Henry Carter's final will and testament. The room became quiet. I folded my hands together. Before we begin, Mr. Whitmore continued, your grandfather prepared detailed instructions. My responsibility is to follow them exactly. Dad smiled confidently. Of course. The lawyer opened the first folder. Several charitable donations will be made according to Mr. Carter's wishes. He read through the list. Nobody seemed very interested. Then he moved on to family assets. To Linda Carter, a personal investment account. Mom smiled. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. To Robert Carter, ownership of the lake property. Dad nodded proudly. That makes sense. I noticed Daniel grinning. He clearly expected the biggest share. Mr. Whitmore continued. To Daniel Carter, 51% ownership of Carter Holdings and all associated executive authority. Daniel's smile widened. Dad clapped him on the shoulder. I knew it. You earned it, Mom said. Grandpa trusted me, Daniel replied. Several relatives congratulated him. I stayed silent. The lawyer turned another page. To Ethan Carter. The room finally looked my way. I sat up straighter. To Ethan Carter, Mr. Henry Carter leaves his personal watch collection and the contents of a small savings account. The room fell silent for 1 second. Then Daniel laughed. That's it. Dad shook his head. I suppose that's fair. A few relatives chuckled. One of my cousins whispered, the writer gets the watches. More laughter followed. I stared at the table. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Part of me had hoped Grandpa saw something in me. Maybe not money. Maybe some sign that I mattered. Instead, it looked like everyone had been right. Dad leaned back in his chair. Well, Ethan, at least you can tell time while chasing impossible dreams. The room laughed again. I clenched my jaw. Enough, I said quietly. Oh, come on, Daniel replied. Learn to take a joke. You've been telling the same joke for years. Dad shrugged. Because nothing changes. My chest tightened. For a moment, I wanted to leave. Then Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat. Please allow me to finish. The room settled down. The lawyer continued reading several smaller distributions. When he finally closed the folder, Dad stood. Well, that seems straightforward. Yes, Daniel said. Grandpa made the right decisions. I pushed my chair back. Part of me wanted to get out of that room as quickly as possible. Then Mr. Whitmore spoke again. Actually, there is one final matter. Everyone stopped moving. Dad frowned. What kind of matter? Mr. Whitmore reached into his briefcase. A sealed personal letter. The room became quiet. Mom looked confused. A letter? Yes. Daniel folded his arms. Who is it for? The lawyer carefully placed an envelope on the table. The paper looked old. The seal remained unbroken. It contains instructions from Henry Carter. Dad frowned. Why wasn't that included with the will? Because your father specifically requested that it be addressed separately. Nobody spoke. I felt a strange knot forming in my stomach. Daniel pointed at the envelope. What does it say? I have not read it. You haven't? No. Dad looked irritated. Then why bring it up now? Because these were your father's exact instructions. The lawyer opened another document. He stated that the letter was not to be discussed until after the will had been completed. Mom exchanged a glance with Dad. This is unusual. Mr. Whitmore nodded. I agree. Daniel laughed softly. Maybe Grandpa left one final lecture. Nobody joined his laughter. Something about the room felt different now. The confidence that had filled it moments earlier began to fade. Dad sat back down. Fine. Read it. Mr. Whitmore shook his head. I cannot yet. What do you mean? There is a second instruction attached to the envelope. The lawyer examined the document. Then he looked around the room. His expression had changed. What is it? Daniel asked. Mr. Whitmore took a slow breath. Henry Carter requested that every family member remain present before the contents are revealed. We're all here, Dad said. Yes. Then open it. The lawyer rested his hand on the envelope. For reasons I could not explain, my heart started pounding. I looked at Grandpa's handwriting across the front. The sight of it brought back memories of hospital visits, long conversations, and promises I still carried inside me. Daniel leaned forward. Well? Mr. Whitmore looked at each of us one last time. Then he carefully broke the seal. The sound seemed louder than it should have been. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For the first time that afternoon, the entire room was completely silent. And somehow, I felt that Grandpa was still about to change all of our lives. Nobody in the room spoke as Mr. Whitmore unfolded the letter. I stared at Grandpa's handwriting and felt my heart pounding against my ribs. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Henry Carter requested that this letter be read exactly as written. Dad crossed his arms. Then read it. Mr. Whitmore nodded and began. To my family. If you are hearing these words, then I am gone. I imagine you have already finished discussing my money, my property, and my business. That is exactly why I wrote this letter. The room became still. The lawyer continued. For many years, I watched this family closely. I saw kindness. I saw loyalty. But I also saw greed, pride, and cruelty. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom looked down. Daniel frowned. Mr. Whitmore kept reading. I spent years hoping certain people would change. Sadly, most of them never did. Dad interrupted. This is ridiculous. Please, Mr. Whitmore said. I must continue. Dad reluctantly sat back. The lawyer read on. I often heard how family members spoke to Ethan. I heard the jokes. I heard the insults. I heard the disappointment in your voices every time he chose a different path. My throat tightened. Nobody looked at me. I watched a young man spend years being told he was a failure. The room remained silent. Meanwhile, the people calling him a failure rarely noticed their own flaws. Daniel rolled his eyes. Seriously. Daniel, Mom whispered. Mr. Whitmore continued. Success is not measured by business titles. Success is not measured by bank accounts. Success is measured by character. For the first time, nobody seemed eager to argue. The lawyer turned the page. Over the last several years, many family members visited me only when they needed something. Advice. Money. Connections. I saw Daniel glance away. But one person came simply because he cared. My chest tightened. One person sat with me when I was lonely. One person listened when I talked. One person never asked for anything in return. Dad's expression hardened. No. Mr. Whitmore kept reading. That person was Ethan. The room fell completely silent. I felt every eye turn toward me. The lawyer continued. 4 years, Ethan believed he disappointed this family. The truth is that this family disappointed me. Dad slammed a hand onto the table. That's enough. It isn't enough, Mr. Whitmore replied firmly. Your father instructed me to read every word. Dad sat back, furious. The lawyer turned another page. Many of you believe you already know the full contents of my estate. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? Mr. Whitmore continued reading. You do not. The room grew tense. 20 years ago, I created a private investment trust. Several relatives exchanged confused looks. Dad leaned forward. What trust? The lawyer kept reading. I intentionally kept this trust secret. It was funded gradually over many years and managed independently. Daniel's confidence visibly faded. I stared at the letter. My pulse quickened. The lawyer continued. The trust has grown significantly over time. Mom raised a hand. How significant? Mr. Whitmore lowered the letter. The current value exceeds $12 million. The room exploded. 12 million? You're joking. That can't be real. My head spun. I thought I had heard wrong. Dad stared at the lawyer. $12 million? Yes. Daniel immediately spoke. Who inherits it? The room became silent again. Mr. Whitmore looked down at the final page. Then he continued. The entire trust belongs to Ethan Carter. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then chaos erupted. What? That's impossible. You have to be kidding. Dad stood so quickly that his chair nearly fell. No. Mom looked shocked. Dad gave Ethan $12 million. Daniel laughed bitterly. This has to be a mistake. It is not, Mr. Whitmore replied. My ears rang. $12 million. The number felt unreal. I could barely process it. Dad pointed at me. What did you do? I blinked. What? What did you do to him? I didn't do anything. Daniel stood. You expect us to believe this? It's the truth. You manipulated him. I stared at my brother. Are you serious? You were always around him. Because I loved him. The room became quiet. Daniel hesitated. I continued. I visited Grandpa because I wanted to see him. Dad scoffed. Convenient. No, I snapped. What's convenient is pretending you cared after ignoring him for years. The word surprised even me. Nobody spoke. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. Mom looked hurt. We cared. Did you? She looked away. Mr. Whitmore opened another folder. There is no legal dispute here. Dad turned toward him. There will be. There cannot be. What? The lawyer calmly slid several documents across the table. Every detail was reviewed by multiple attorneys. The trust is fully protected. Daniel grabbed the papers. There has to be a loophole. There isn't. Dad looked furious. This is absurd. No, Mr. Whitmore said. It is your father's decision. The room filled with angry whispers. Relatives who had ignored me moments earlier suddenly stared at me differently. Some looked jealous. Others looked stunned. I sat quietly, trying to understand what had just happened. Grandpa had believed in me. Not only with words. With actions. Years of doubt began cracking inside me. For so long, I had accepted the role they gave me. The failure. The disappointment. The joke. Now I realized Grandpa had never seen me that way. Daniel threw the documents onto the table. You tricked him. I met his eyes. No. You just never understood him. Dad pointed at me again. This family built everything together. I shook my head. No. Grandpa built everything. The room went silent. For the first time, nobody laughed at me. For the first time, nobody interrupted me. For the first time in my life, they could not take away what mattered. The money shocked them. The letter embarrassed them. But Grandpa's words were what truly changed everything. Because sitting in that room, surrounded by angry faces and broken expectations, I finally understood something. I was never the family failure. I was simply the only person Grandpa truly trusted. And judging by the hatred now filling the room, that truth was going to change every relationship in my life from this moment forward. The week after the reading of Grandpa's letter felt like living in a different world. 4 years, my phone had been mostly silent. Now it never stopped ringing. The first call came from Mom. Good morning, Ethan. I nearly laughed. Mom never called before noon unless she needed something. Morning. How are you doing? I'm fine. That's good. An awkward silence followed. Then she asked, would you like to come over for dinner? I leaned back in my chair. You haven't invited me to dinner in months. Well, families should spend time together. Should they? She hesitated. Yes. We'll see. After hanging up, I stared at the phone. The conversation felt strange. 3 days earlier, I had been the disappointment. Now everyone suddenly wanted a relationship. The next call came from Dad. Ethan. Dad. I reserved a table at Bellamy Steakhouse. Why? We should talk. About what? Business. I laughed. I don't have a business. You have opportunities now. There it was. The real reason. I'm busy. With what? My writing. Dad sighed heavily. You're still focused on that? Yes. You have resources now. Think bigger. I am thinking bigger. He sounded frustrated. Fine. The call ended. That evening, Daniel showed up at my apartment. I opened the door and froze. Daniel? Can I come in? That alone felt unusual. Sure. He stepped inside and looked around. You really live here? Last time I checked. It's smaller than I expected. I smiled. You haven't visited before. He ignored the comment. We sat across from each other. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he cleared his throat. I wanted to say congratulations. Thanks. You know, maybe we got off on the wrong foot over the years. I almost choked. The wrong foot? Yeah. Daniel, you spent years calling me a failure. He shifted uncomfortably. Maybe I went too far sometimes. Sometimes? Fine. A lot. That was probably the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. Still, something felt off. The conversation sounded rehearsed. Like he was following a script. After 20 minutes, he left. The moment the door closed, I felt exhausted. Everyone suddenly cared about me. But none of it felt real. A week later, I walked into a small bookstore downtown. The smell of paper instantly relaxed me. A woman behind the counter smiled. Can I help you? Just looking. Dangerous answer. I laughed. Why? People who say that usually leave with 3 books. She had dark hair and kind eyes. I'll try to prove you wrong. Good luck. An hour later, I stood at the counter holding 4 books. She grinned. I win. You do. I'm Sophia Bennett. Ethan Carter. She scanned the books. You read a lot. I want to write professionally. Her eyes brightened. Really? Most people laugh when I say that. Then most people are boring. I laughed again. Thank you. For what? For not looking at me like I'm crazy. Sophia leaned against the counter. Dreams only sound crazy to people who gave up on theirs. The words hit harder than she realized. Over the next month, I returned to the bookstore often. Sometimes I bought books. Sometimes I just talked with Sophia. One afternoon, she noticed my mood. You're thinking too hard. That obvious? Yes. I sighed. My family spent years convincing me I wasn't good enough. And now? Now they suddenly act like they love me. She folded her arms. What changed? You know what changed? The inheritance. I nodded. Sophia frowned. That must hurt. It does. Because you wanted their love before the money existed. Exactly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled gently. You know what I see? What? A guy who survived years of being underestimated. I looked away. No. Yes. I still hear their voices in my head. That takes time. What does? Healing. The word stayed with me long after I left. Maybe she was right. Maybe healing wasn't something that happened overnight. Maybe it happened one conversation at a time. Over the following weeks, I focused on writing. For the first time, I didn't need to worry about bills. I could finally chase the dream Grandpa always encouraged. Each completed chapter felt like a small victory. Each day felt lighter. Then one evening, my phone rang. Daniel. I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered. Hello? Ethan, can we meet? His voice sounded different. Less confident. Why? It's important. The next night, we met at a quiet coffee shop. Daniel looked tired. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. You okay? I asked. He forced a smile. Not really. That surprised me. Daniel never admitted weakness. What's going on? He looked around to make sure nobody was listening. Then he lowered his voice. I need your help. My stomach tightened. What kind of help? He swallowed hard. Financial help. I stared at him. For the first time in my life, Daniel Carter looked desperate. And something told me this conversation was only the beginning of a much larger problem. I stared at Daniel across the coffee shop table. Financial help? I asked. He nodded. Yes. How much? He looked down. A lot. That's not a number. Daniel rubbed his forehead. 2 million. I nearly laughed. $2 million. I can pay it back. With what? His silence gave me the answer. I leaned back in my chair. Daniel, what happened? Business problems. You always said the company was doing great. It was. That sounds like a lie. His jaw tightened. Things changed. For how long? He didn't answer. For how long? I repeated. A year. I stared at him. A year. I thought I could fix it. Without telling anyone? Yes. I shook my head. You spent years calling me irresponsible. I know. And now you're asking me for $2 million. His face reddened. I know. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered years of insults. Years of being treated like I was worthless. No, I said. Daniel looked up. What? I won't do it. Ethan. No. You don't understand. Then explain. He opened his mouth but closed it again. That told me everything. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As I walked outside, my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. How did it go? You were right. About what? Something is wrong. That evening, I told her everything. We sat inside the bookstore after closing. Sophia listened carefully. He asked for $2 million. Yes. That's not a small mistake. Exactly. She studied my face. You look conflicted. I am. Why? Part of me wants to watch him suffer. She nodded. That makes sense. And part of me feels guilty for thinking that. That also makes sense. I laughed softly. You always make things sound simple. They usually are. Not this. No, she admitted. Not this. Over the next few weeks, rumors started spreading. Employees began leaving the family company. Investors grew nervous. People who once praised Daniel suddenly started asking questions. One afternoon, Dad called me. His voice sounded exhausted. Have you spoken to your brother? Recently. He says everything is under control. You don't believe him? There was a long pause. No. That answer shocked me. For as long as I could remember, Dad believed Daniel could do no wrong. What happened? I asked. Projects are failing. How bad? Bad. For the first time, I heard genuine fear in his voice. Days later, I met an old employee from the company. We spoke over lunch. Daniel made risky decisions, he told me. How risky? Very. Why didn't anyone stop him? He laughed bitterly. Because everyone thought he was a genius. The word stayed with me. A genius. That was what they had always called him. Meanwhile, I had been the failure. Now the picture looked very different. One evening, I sat with Sophia in a park. The sun was beginning to set. I found out something today, I said. What? Daniel has debts everywhere. She frowned. How serious? Serious enough that he's panicking. Sophia remained quiet. Then she asked, does that make you happy? I thought carefully before answering. A little. Honest answer. But it also makes me sad. Why? Because Grandpa spent years trying to hold this family together. She nodded. And now? Now everything is falling apart. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally Sophia turned toward me. What would Grandpa tell you right now? I already knew. He'd tell me not to become bitter. And? He'd tell me character matters more than revenge. She smiled. Sounds like a smart man. He was. As the sky darkened above us, I realized the real battle wasn't happening inside the company. It was happening inside me. I could enjoy watching Daniel fall. I had plenty of reasons. But every time anger pulled me in one direction, Grandpa's voice pulled me in another. For the first time, I understood that winning wasn't about getting even. It was about deciding what kind of man I wanted to become when everyone else was losing themselves. A month after Daniel asked me for money, I received a call from Mr. Whitmore. Ethan, I need you to come to my office. His serious tone immediately caught my attention. Is something wrong? That depends on how you look at it. An hour later, I sat across from him. Several folders were spread across his desk. What is all this? I asked. Mr. Whitmore removed his glasses. Documents your grandfather instructed me to reveal only if certain circumstances occurred. My stomach tightened. What circumstances? If the family business began showing signs of serious financial trouble. I stared at him. Grandpa expected this. He prepared for the possibility. The lawyer opened one of the folders. Inside were copies of old bank records. Years ago, Daniel accumulated enormous debts. I frowned. How enormous? Several $1 million. My eyes widened. What? Mr. Whitmore nodded. Failed investments. Bad partnerships. Poor decisions. Dad never mentioned any of this. He didn't know. What do you mean? Your grandfather kept it secret. I leaned forward. Why? Because he wanted to protect Daniel. The answer stunned me. 4 years, my family had treated Daniel like a self-made success. Now I was learning that Grandpa had been quietly rescuing him behind the scenes. Mr. Whitmore handed me another document. Your grandfather paid off these debts personally. I scanned the pages. The numbers were unbelievable. He saved Daniel? Multiple times. I sat back in disbelief. All these years, everyone thought Daniel built everything himself. That's what your grandfather allowed them to believe. Why? Love can make people protect others from consequences. The words lingered in my mind. A few days later, Mr. Whitmore gathered the entire family. The atmosphere felt tense from the moment everyone arrived. Dad looked exhausted. Mom seemed nervous. Daniel avoided eye contact. Mr. Whitmore stood. I have additional information regarding Henry Carter's estate. Dad frowned. What information? The lawyer opened the folder. Information Mr. Carter instructed me to reveal if necessary. Daniel immediately looked uncomfortable. My father noticed. Daniel? My brother remained silent. Mr. Whitmore began explaining everything. The debts. The bailouts. The hidden payments. The second chances. Each revelation hit the room harder than the last. Dad's face turned pale. Mom covered her mouth. No, she whispered. Mr. Whitmore slid the records across the table. These documents confirm everything. Dad grabbed them. His hands shook as he read. You told us you built this company. Daniel stared at the floor. Dad. You told us you earned everything. Please let me explain. Explain what? Years of frustration exploded from my father. All these years, I compared Ethan to you. Nobody spoke. You let us believe you were perfect. Daniel finally looked up. Tears filled his eyes. I never wanted it to go this far. Mom looked devastated. Why didn't you tell us? Because every time I failed, Grandpa fixed it. The room became silent. I thought I could eventually make things right. Dad laughed bitterly. You built your reputation on secrets. Daniel wiped his eyes. I know. For the first time in my life, I didn't see my brother as the favorite son. I saw a scared man drowning in his own mistakes. Then Dad slowly turned toward me. The look on his face hurt more than all his insults ever had. It was regret. Real regret. How many times did I tell you that you weren't good enough? He asked quietly. I didn't answer. How many times? A lot. His shoulders slumped. Mom began crying. We were wrong. The words felt strange coming from her. Dad looked down. We spent years judging the wrong son. Nobody knew what to say. The truth had shattered everything. The perfect image of Daniel was gone. The excuses were gone. The favoritism was finally exposed. As everyone sat in stunned silence, I felt something unexpected. Not victory. Not revenge. Just clarity. For years, I had believed there was something wrong with me. Now I finally understood the truth. I was never fighting against my own failure. I was fighting against the lie my family had chosen to believe. And now that lie was gone forever. A week after the truth came out, Dad called me. Can we talk? His voice sounded different. Not angry. Not demanding. Just tired. I hesitated before answering. Okay. We met at a small cafe near the park Grandpa used to visit. When I arrived, Dad was already sitting at a corner table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me and sighed. I don't know how to start this. You could start with the truth. He nodded slowly. You deserve that. I waited. Dad rubbed his hands together. For years, I thought I was helping you. I almost laughed. Helping me? Yes. By calling me a failure? His face tightened. I know how that sounds. Because that's exactly what happened. He lowered his eyes. You're right. The admission surprised me. My father never admitted he was wrong. Not about anything. I wanted you to be strong, he said. So you tore me down? I thought pressure would make you succeed. It didn't. I know. The words hung between us. Finally, he looked at me again. I spent so much time trying to make you into someone else that I never accepted who you already were. For a second, I couldn't speak. Those were the words I had wanted to hear for years. Yet hearing them now didn't erase the damage. You hurt me, Dad. I know. More than you realize. His eyes filled with regret. I know that too. The next day, Mom asked to see me. We met at her house. The moment I walked inside, she started crying. Mom. I'm sorry. I stood there quietly. She wiped her eyes. I should have protected you. The pain in her voice sounded genuine. When Dad criticized you, I stayed silent. I didn't interrupt. When Daniel mocked you, I stayed silent. She shook her head. I kept telling myself things would get better. But they didn't. No. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I failed you. The words hurt because part of me agreed. A few days later, Daniel came to my apartment. This time he looked even worse than before. His confidence was completely gone. Can I come in? I nodded. We sat across from each other. The silence felt heavy. Finally, Daniel spoke. I don't expect forgiveness. Good. A sad smile appeared on his face. Fair enough. He looked down. I was jealous of you. That caught me off guard. Jealous? Yes. Why? Because Grandpa loved you without expectations. I stared at him. He loved you too. Not the same way. Daniel sighed. I spent my entire life trying to be perfect. You were the favorite. I know. Then why are you complaining? Because being the favorite became a prison. For the first time, I saw something honest in him. Not arrogance. Not pride. Just exhaustion. I made mistakes, he continued. Big mistakes. Yes. And instead of admitting them, I kept lying. I nodded. That part is obvious. He almost laughed. I deserve that. When he left, I sat alone for a long time. My family had apologized. Years earlier, I would have given anything to hear those words. Now they felt complicated. The hurt was still there. The memories were still there. Nothing could change that. But Grandpa had taught me something important. Forgiveness was not the same as pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness was choosing not to carry the anger forever. That night, I stood beside my apartment window and looked out at the city lights. 4 years, I had lived for my family's approval. Now I finally understood that I didn't need it. Their opinions could no longer define me. Their mistakes belonged to them. My future belonged to me. I chose peace. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved it. And for the first time in my life, that felt enough. 8 months later, my life looked completely different. One afternoon, I sat inside Sophia's bookstore holding a letter with trembling hands. Well? Sophia asked. I looked up. I think I'm afraid to open it. She laughed. You've been staring at that envelope for 5 minutes. What if it's a rejection? What if it isn't? I smiled nervously. You always do that. Do what? Make me think positively. Someone has to. I finally opened the envelope. My eyes raced across the page. Then I stopped breathing. Ethan? I looked at her. They accepted it. Her eyes widened. What? My book. For a second, she just stared at me. Then she jumped from behind the counter and hugged me. They accepted it. I laughed. They accepted it. The excitement in her voice made the moment feel even more real. Months of writing. Months of doubt. Months of remembering Grandpa's words. And now I finally had proof that I wasn't chasing an impossible dream. A few weeks later, my publisher arranged a public event to celebrate the release of the book. The morning of the event, I barely slept. Sophia handed me a cup of coffee. You look terrified. I am terrified. You wrote the book. That's different. How? I wrote it alone. She smiled. Today you're sharing it. The event took place in a large bookstore downtown. Rows of chairs filled the room. People gathered around tables stacked with copies of my novel. I stared at the crowd. I can't believe this. Sophia squeezed my arm. Believe it. When my name was announced, applause filled the room. I stepped onto the small stage. My heart pounded. For a moment, I saw Grandpa in my mind. The hospital room. The conversations. The promise. I took a breath. Thank you for being here. The room became quiet. I spent most of my life believing I wasn't good enough. Several people nodded. I thought success belonged to other people. I paused. Then someone important taught me something. My voice softened. He taught me that other people's opinions don't decide your value. The audience listened carefully. He taught me that failure isn't falling down. I smiled. It's refusing to get back up. Applause followed. As I looked across the room, I noticed something unexpected. My parents. They sat near the back. Neither of them had told me they were coming. Dad noticed me looking. Instead of his usual confident expression, he simply nodded. Mom smiled through tears. The sight caught me off guard. After the event ended, a line formed for book signings. Hours passed. Eventually the crowd thinned. Dad approached first. That was a good speech. Thanks. He glanced at the stack of books. No. What? A great speech. The words meant more than he probably realized. Mom stepped forward. Your grandfather would be proud. I smiled softly. I hope so. He would, she said. This time I believed her. Later that evening, Daniel arrived. He looked different than he had months earlier. Not successful. Not polished. Just honest. How are things? I asked. He shrugged. Slow. The company? Still struggling. I nodded. At least it's real now. A small smile appeared on his face. Yeah. For the first time in years, there was no competition between us. No comparisons. No pretending. Just two brothers talking. As the evening ended, Sophia joined me outside. The city lights glowed around us. You did it, she said. We did it. She smiled. I'll accept partial credit. I laughed. Then I looked up at the night sky. For years, I thought Grandpa believed in me because of talent. I thought he saw something special that nobody else could see. Now I understood the truth. It wasn't talent. It wasn't money. It wasn't success. He believed in me because I kept going. No matter how many times life knocked me down. No matter how many people doubted me. I kept moving forward. That was what Grandpa saw. And standing there beside Sophia, surrounded by the life I had built for myself, I finally saw it too. 1 year after Grandpa's death, I found myself walking through the same park where we had spent countless afternoons together. The morning air was cool and quiet. In my hand, I carried a copy of my published novel. I followed the familiar path until I reached Grandpa's favorite bench. For a moment, I simply stood there. The memories came back instantly. His laughter. His advice. The way he always listened when nobody else did. I sat down slowly and placed the book beside me. It's finished, Grandpa, I said quietly. The empty bench offered no reply. Still, somehow, it felt like he was listening. I opened the book and ran my fingers across the cover. A year earlier, I had been lost. I spent most of my life trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided who I was. No matter how hard I worked, it never seemed enough. No matter how much I hoped, the disappointment remained. Then everything changed. Not because of the money. Not because of the inheritance. Because of the truth. Grandpa had seen me differently than everyone else. He had seen the person I could become. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. I smiled. You knew before I did. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. Are you at the park? She asked. Yeah. How are you doing? I looked around at the familiar surroundings. Better than I expected. I figured. You know me too well. I try. I laughed softly. I'm proud of you, Ethan. The words warmed my chest. Thank you. No, she said. Thank you. For what? For proving that people can survive being underestimated. I smiled. Grandpa helped. I know. After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes. Then I reached into my bag. Inside was Grandpa's final letter. The same letter that had changed everything. The edges were worn from being read so many times. I unfolded it carefully. My eyes moved across the familiar words. 4 years, Ethan believed he disappointed this family. The truth is that this family disappointed me. Even now, the sentence hit me differently. Not because it attacked my family. Because it freed me. For so long, I carried responsibility for their opinions. I thought their approval was something I had to earn. I thought their criticism meant they were right. I thought my failures defined me. Grandpa showed me another possibility. He showed me that self-worth cannot come from people who refuse to see your value. It has to come from within. I folded the letter again. Nearby, children laughed as they played. Birds moved through the trees. Life continued. It always did. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was Dad. "Morning," he said. "Morning. I wanted to check on you." "I'm okay." There was a brief silence. "Your mother and I are visiting Grandpa's grave later." I nodded. "That's nice. Would like you to join us if you want." The invitation surprised me. Not because it existed. Because it felt sincere. "I'll be there." "Would like that." After the call ended, I looked toward the sky. A year ago, those words would have meant everything. Now they simply felt pleasant. The difference mattered. Their approval no longer controlled me. Their opinions no longer determined my happiness. I had built my own life. My own future. My own identity. And that freedom was worth more than any inheritance. Eventually, I stood from the bench. Before leaving, I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. I had written it the night before. Slowly, I walked to Grandpa's grave. The cemetery was peaceful. Fresh flowers rested near the headstone. I knelt and placed the note beside them. Then I read it aloud. "You were the only person who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." My voice trembled. "Thank you for every conversation." I swallowed hard. "Thank you for every second chance." The wind stirred gently around me. Most of all, thank you for teaching me that my value never depended on anyone else's approval. I looked at Grandpa's name carved into the stone. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they weren't caused by pain. They were caused by gratitude. A deep, lasting gratitude that would stay with me forever. I placed my hand against the headstone one last time. Then I smiled. "You were right about me." For the first time in many years, there was no anger in my heart. No bitterness. No need for revenge. Only peace. And as I walked away beneath the morning sunlight, I realized Grandpa's greatest gift had never been the money he left behind. It had been his belief. When nobody else believed in me, he did. That belief changed my life. And because of it, I finally became the person he always knew I could be.